Welcome back everybody to episode 2 of the Final Fantasy 3 review. So when I made these recordings, the plan wasn't to actually have it split in two, but rather as one long continuous episode. That's why it may feel a bit disjointed, but when I do later reviews of the Final Fantasy series, I'll just make sure to account for this in future. So continuing on. Waking up in an inn, we'll find out that this little girl and her grandfather have rescued us from the cave and that we've been out for 3 days. Thanking the girl and her grandfather, we can then explore the town to find out what has happened since then. Starting at the bar, the residents will mention that it feels as if they've woken up from a vivid dream, telling us that they neither remember the earthquake nor being turned to stone. You'll also find out that the Enterprise has been chained by a man named Goldor, a paranoid and greedy man who lives in a house of solid gold nearby, and was afraid that we were the warriors of the crystal, so to protect his crystal, he locked us in the same area he is in, thus going to force a direct confrontation between us, and most likely lead us to going after the crystal that he was trying to protect. Are you serious? It just didn't make much sense because the thing is, he's trying to protect his crystal because he's paranoid he'll come after it. So what he does is, he locks us in the same area that he is in. Because yes, clearly when I want to protect something from a specific someone, I lock their only form of transportation and force them to come to me directly at my house where I'm most likely keeping said thing, eventually leading them to come into contact with it, and thus my worst nightmare has come true, because if he didn't chain it, they wouldn't have spoken about Goldor because he wouldn't have asked about the chain, and then they would have just sailed away not knowing about it. But carrying on, to get to him, we also find out that we're going to need some leathergrass boots, as the path to his house is blocked by a bottomless bog. And the only person that has a pair of said shoes is Delilah, who lives down in the sewers. Also, before leaving, it'd be criminal of me not to mention this piano, because if you interact with it, you get treated to an exquisite scene that I would highly recommend you check out. Leaving the inn and exploring further, you can find the old man that was taking care of Arya. While he is sad about her passing, he then reminds the party to honor her by fulfilling her dying wish. You'll also meet these 4 harmless guys called the Fellows, who believe that they are the warriors of legend, and will become important in the story a bit later. When exploring, you'll also find out that to get to the sewers, you'll need to unlock this gate, and the only person with the key to it is Gil. When speaking to him, you'll try to explain that we are the warriors of legend and need to reach it. While speaking to him, the Fellows eavesdrop on the conversation, and to prove that they are the real chosen ones, they plan on beating us to the sewers. Unaware of this, the party is then able to finally convince Gil, and he agrees and goes to unlock the gate, allowing the party to move forward. Entering the sewers, we'll have to find our way to reach Delilah. During this, you'll come across the Fellows again, who are now surrounded by monsters. Saving them, they'll thank us and will finally accept that they aren't the warriors of light and say that they are in our debt. Then, going on, eventually finding Delilah, we'll try to convince her that we need the leathergrass shoes. Although skeptical, she surprisingly hands it over to us without much hassle. Before we can receive them, the Fellows rush in, telling us to watch out, as those aren't the real ones, revealing that they were actually bombs. Evading it and coming to realize that they weren't lying, they then convince Delilah to give us the real ones, to which she finally does so before they teleport us outside. Leaving the village of Amor, we can then go south to find Goldor's mansion and the bottomless bog that we were warned of. But with the leathergrass shoes, it doesn't pose much of a challenge. When you enter the mansion, you'll have to fight through enemies as well as get through these locked doors to reach Goldor. If you remember, to get through these doors, you'll just need the thief job's lockpicking skills or magic keys. And if you wish to explore, you'll eventually find these golden swords. While they aren't useful for combat, you can sell them to turn over a pretty good profit. Then returning to our main mission, to get to Goldor, you'll have to take this specific secret passage to get to him. Whereupon finding him, he'll immediately engage us in a fight, desperate to protect his crystal. After defeating him, in panic he runs over and destroys the crystal to stop us from taking it, which is not good. He then gives a final laugh before passing, and when his body disappears, the key that is chaining our ship to the continent is left behind. Upon touching it, it disappears and reads that the Enterprise has been freed. Unsure what to do now that the crystal is destroyed, we can then head back to Amor. To be honest, at this point, I didn't really know what to do, so I started speaking to the residents of Amur again, and now they're all of a sudden just mentioning Saronia. Since none of them mentioned where it is, I then decided to just go exploring with the Enterprise around the map. When I was looking around, I just see on the mini-map right here that this most likely is Saronia. So before going directly to Saronia, I just wanted to explore the map because I realized that in Final Fantasy III, a lot of the locations are actually missable, where you don't have to visit them for the entire story, and thus wanted to just see what I could find. So what I first found was this path that I can't go into, especially if I'm on the Enterprise. If I try to go on foot, I'll then collapse due to me inciting the wrath of the ancient statues. I then also found this town called Duster, which is full of geomancers and bards. When speaking to the bards, each of them sang a story of a legendary monster that I can obtain for summoning and gave hints to where I could find it. I also met this jerk who made me think I obtained something valuable, but that was him just showing off his barding skills. How you make a sound like that with a harp, I will honestly never be able to tell you. Also, one of them makes mention of the Dal's continent and its high winds that prevent anything from getting close to it. Leaving and going on, I then found the town of Repleto that contains evokers and summoners, where the stores also sell summons for all levels except for 6, 7, and 8, which you'll have to look for. Speaking to the Repleto invokers, they'll make mention of a man named Noah who lived on the Dal continent and was powerful enough to command both Bahamut and Leviathan. They then tell us that he sealed them on the floating continent. You can also find this Galgan here, who tells us that in ancient times the power of light flooded the world during a cataclysmic event called the Wrath of Light, but now it is happening with the darkness and something must be summoning it, and that if either the light or darkness were to envelop the world, nothing would survive it. Before moving on, I just want to give a quick thought. I felt that the parts with Goldor and Amur was a pretty lackluster part of the story, as it honestly just felt uneventful and was more filler than anything. His motivations were nonsensical, and even if you try to justify it as him being too paranoid to think logically, it doesn't really make sense, even if you were trying to hide your crystal from everyone and keep your possessions a secret. Additionally, this brings me to another issue, that the main story doesn't tell you where to go next or why you'd want a faster airship. I could argue that this forces you to be lost and in a sense encourages you to explore the world, as a lot of the locations, as I mentioned previously, are optional. I do appreciate this, but a lot of the locations only serve to teach the player more about the world and classes, and while it does wonders for world building, it unfortunately comes at the price of the story's pacing and depth. Additionally, these locations don't really have any interesting lore pieces outside of the main story, and just give hints on where to head next, making it feel as if the player's curiosity drives the story and not the characters themselves. So while lore-wise this is excellent, it unfortunately caused the main story to come to a drag and struggle with its pacing, which it already had a problem with. So to continue on with the exploration, there's another kingdom that can't be entered by foot, which was the one I assumed to be Saronia. If you fly over it in this dangerous area with cannons, which, to be quite honest, wasn't really the smartest idea, the airship will be destroyed and you'll be stranded in the castle city of Saronia, the place we were looking for. Recovering from the crash, we find ourselves between two armies. Whereupon speaking to them, they'll mention that they are fighting against their own countrymen and that the side that loses will be branded as traitors and be executed. Then leaving this area as there's not much else to do, we can then explore 4 different areas, only 2 being important to the story. To be honest, when entering these locations I had low expectations, as I was expecting all the places to either lead to the same location or to a copy and pasted one, and I was fairly surprised when they all turned out to be unique. Entering southeastern Saronia, we enter a town with a tower in the center. Speaking to the residents, they tell us that it is the Dragon Spire, where the dragoons keep their prized treasures at the top of the tower. But the issue is, it is infested with monsters, making it dangerous. If we wish to venture deep and go all the way to the top, we will find weapons and armor for the dragoon job. Then heading to northeastern Saronia, we can find out that the king of Saronia also splits his military in half and has set them to go against each other. Speaking to some of the townsfolk, they mentioned that Minister Gigamet's shadow looked like a giant bird, which was akin to the mythic Garuda. Additionally, there's mention that dragoons are the only job that are able to take them down. How they know that it's Garuda, I don't exactly know. Then heading to northwestern Saronia, it also has a library, but unfortunately it's blocked off. Also, when exploring Saronia, you'll find that a majority of the stores are sealed. This was due to a royal decree by the king. Going to southwestern Saronia, you can then find these old men that are scattered around the town, all wishing that Prince Alice was around to help. Speaking to this one in front of the tavern, he tells us that a young man that looked like the prince was in the tavern behind him. Then entering this tavern, we find the young prince surrounded by thugs mocking him for impersonating the prince. We then step in to save him and enter the fight with the thugs, whereupon defeating them, they plead for mercy and step out of our way. Speaking to Alice, he then introduces himself and thanks us for helping him. Asking him about what happened, he tells him that his father has changed all of a sudden and pitted his forces against one another. He tried to reason with his father but was unswayed, and due to this, his father sent him into exile. Most likely impressed by our show of strength against the thugs, he then requests that we travel with him again to try and reason with his father to stop this madness. Then, agreeing to help him, he then joins our party. Also, before you head directly to the castle, just a bit of a heads up, if you speak to these old men again with Alice, they'll then now give you additional items to help you on your journey. Heading to the castle, we are initially turned away, but a soldier then interrupts, telling the gatekeeper that we have been given permission to enter. The soldier then leads us into the castle and gives us a room to rest before our audience with the king tomorrow. The party then immediately goes to sleep, but Alice, unable to, then speaks to us, telling us that he is troubled by what happened to his father and is hurt that his own father exiled him. We then try to console him by telling him that there is no parent in the world that doesn't love their own child, but it does little to help. The king then silently enters the room and slowly approaches Alice from behind. He then attacks with a knife, yelling death to the prince. Alice, shocked, begs his father to stop and asks what he is doing. Minister Gigamet then enters the room, asking why the king has stopped trying to kill the prince. With all his strength, the king then turns the knife on himself, refusing to be manipulated any further, and would rather die than hurt his own son. To prevent Gigamet from bringing further harm to the prince and the king, we then step in and enter a battle with him. When we enter a fight, Gigamet takes on the form of a bird called Garuda that uses magic to inflict serious damage to the party. I would recommend using a dragoon or two in your party, as they deal insane damage to flying enemies and make quick work of this boss. After defeating Gigamet, the king explains to Alice that he doesn't deserve forgiveness, nor does he expect it, but that Alice must know that his return has saved him and that his soul has been freed. He then tells Alice to take his rightful place on the throne and restore peace to Saronia, and with his final breath, tells his son that he loves him and succumbs to his wounds. Alice then turns to us and gives his thanks, saying that he was a fool for doubting his father's love, and will honor his father's dying wish and assume the throne. After Alice has left, you can then find him in the throne room where he's planning to usher in a new era of peace and offers us anything in the kingdom that will aid us in our quest. You'll also find these bards in the throne room that sing about a temple that lies north of Saronia underwater, and Noah's lute, which is an instrument that can resound within dreams that is hidden in the Temple of Time. Leaving the castle, we can then head to this left building over here. You can learn that when Noah died, he bequeathed his power to his three disciples Doga, Une, and Zande, and that they are the only ones powerful enough to have caused the calamity we are facing, and are residing in Dalg. The mage then tells us that the Nautilus engine should also be powerful enough to get past the gales on the south of Dalg. Then entering the right building, we will meet the Saronian Engineering Corps. Upon speaking to them, they'll run out to prepare the Nautilus for us as a token of their gratitude. Then going outside, we can enter this airship and immediately begin flying around with it. And by the way, when they said the Nautilus was fast, they weren't actually kidding, because I actually struggled using it due to its speed from time to time. Before leaving, we can go back to northwestern Saronia and read some of the books in the library. In the volumes of the Book of Owen, he speaks about how he named the towers and explains that due to the Wrath of Light being a miscalculation, he will have to place his son Desh into cryogenic sleep so that in case things go wrong, he can wake up and replace it. One of the books here also give an explanation of the facts you have been collecting up until now, and explain that they will allow safe passage through the effigies mist. We can also read other books that mention that the ancients abused the power that the light has given them, thus bringing forth the Wrath of Light, and that during the time of writing there was no way to stop it. But then in the next volume there's mention of the Warriors of the Dark, and tells us that they were able to forestall the Wrath of Light. There's also this one book that I have a feeling is a bit of a contradiction or out of place, as it lists the top 3 airships of the year, and the Enterprise being among them. I am uncertain if they were talking about the Enterprise that we were using, that was originally a ship, or another ship of the same name. Additionally, I don't think anyone in Saronia would have had time to study it considering it exploded upon arriving. Or maybe it was originally planned to be an airship, but during the development the idea was scrapped or changed. Returning to the Nautilus, we can now push past the high winds and reach Doga's Manor, where upon entering it we will be seen as trespassers and immediately surrounded by Kupo. Doga will then come to confront us, but immediately recognizes us as the Warriors of Light. And accepting the crystal's choice, he explains that his old colleague Zande, a former fellow disciple of Noah and the master of those evil servants that we've been fighting up until now, is threatening the world of darkness. He further explains that when Noah died, he gave each of his disciples a gift. Doga with his magic, Une with powers over the dreamscape, and Zande the gift of human mortality. Unhappy with his gift, Xande turned his anger towards the world and brought about the Great Earthquake. We then informed Doga that the Earth Crystal was destroyed, but Doga tells us that it was a rock that he chanted to produce gold, and the real crystal is still hidden away. Although he doesn't explain why he created a fake Earth Crystal, nor why it had to be in the shape of an Earth Crystal. Because wouldn't it have sufficed just to give Goldor something similar to a Philosopher's Stone? You could also argue that maybe Goldor was originally looking for the actual Earth Crystal before, and that Doga gave it to him to distract him, but again, this falls flat when you realize that Goldor was petrified and had no access to an airship to reach the Fangs on the floating continent. I feel this was more of a gotcha moment or a twist, but it kind of leaves more questions than answers. Doga then continues by telling us that Xande is trying to get rid of the lights in the world by harnessing the powers of darkness, and to prevent this from happening, he'll join us on our journey. And that our first stop will be to go to the Cave of the Circle. Before going to the entrance to the cave, speaking to the Koopa, they mentioned where Une currently sleeps and explained that when Xande received his gift, he left without saying a word, probably leading to Doga and Une assuming he went somewhere quiet to cool off. Then to reach the circle, we'll have to enter this cave over here where the party will have to remain shrunk throughout. You'll also face many enemies, so I suggest swapping to a magic class unless you plan to flee. Then reaching the circle, Doga tells us that his life force won't last much longer and that he will cast a spell on our ship so that it can travel underwater. This will allow us then to reach Noah's loot in the Temple of Time that is underwater south of Saronia. He then tells us that with the loot, we will be able to awake Une from a dream, and once we find her, we can find the Invincible, a colossal airship. And while we are off doing this, Doga plans to fetch a Eureka key and bids us farewell, teleporting us outside his mansion. Following the directions, we can then dive underwater using the Nautilus, where we are now able to reach some new locations. One I would recommend is going to Doga's village, which you can access from here. They sell spells of multiple levels of both the white and black magic variety here. Once you're ready, you can then head to this location here, where we can then find the Temple of Time. In this location, you'll have to traverse through multiple floors to reach Noah's loot at the end, where upon collecting it, it will play a unique tune. Just a bit of a warning, unless you want to have a thief in your party the entire time, I suggest bringing magical keys, as a lot of doors are locked here. Then once we have the loot of time, we can leave and head to Une. If you stopped by her previously, the parrot next to her will have no clue how to wake her up, but bringing the loot, we can then wake her up using it, and with a renewed sense of energy, she jumps around the room to stretch. Speaking to her, she is happy to be back in the real world and tells us that Doga managed to reach her in the dream world and caught her up on the situation in the real world while she was asleep. She then mentions that we need to head to the ancient ruins in the north to find the Invincible and tags along with us to find it. But before leaving, she nearly forgets to hand us the Fang of Fire, leaving us with 3 in total, and mentions that having 4 of these will get us past the 4 statues that are guarding Xande's tower, and that the final Fang can be found using the Invincible airship. This lines up with one of the books we found in Saronia where it speaks of the 4 statues as well, meaning that even during the time of the ancients, Xande has been around. Unfortunately, the passage of time in the game isn't clarified in the story too much, and all we know is that it was either stopped or we needed to restore it. Then heading to the ancient ruins, we will come face to face with a new type of enemy, the visible ones. When hitting the visible monsters with normal weapons, they will either multiply or divide, increasing the number you are fighting. The best way to counter this is to either deal enough damage to wipe out the enemy with a single hit, or swapping over to the Dark Knight job, as the abilities and equipment for this class are specifically aimed at dealing with divisible enemies. Entering the ancient ruins, Une destroys the adamantite rocks blocking the path, allowing us to delve deeper into the ruins. And just to remind you, adamantite is considered to be one of the strongest materials in the game, so much so that in 1 it was used to forge Excalibur, the strongest sword in that installment. Once you reach deep enough, you will come across some merchants who worm their way into the ruins and are selling what they found, which includes some really strong equipment and weapons, but unfortunately comes at a pretty penny. Then reaching the 8th level, we then find ourselves aboard the Invincible, which was one of my favorite additions to this game. This is an all-in-one mobile pit stop for the party, as you can find spots to access shops so you can buy equipment and magic, beds to rest, and restore your HP and MP, as well as a quick and easy area to call the Fat Chocobo. So while this airship isn't the fastest, it does make up for it in utility. After giving us a brief tour of the airship, Une leads us to head to Doga's mansion, but in the meantime she quests us with finding the Fang of Earth, which rests in the Cave of Shadows north of Amur. and once we have it, we should then meet her at Doga's mansion. So here comes one of the more tedious parts of the game. So the Invincible allows us to fly over small mountain walls like this, and to reach the Cave of Shadows, you'll have to deal with this cluster of menaces. And dear God, this was the worst part of the game. Every time you have to get over these walls, regardless of if you fail or succeed, you have to watch an animation. And what's worse is, there are false paths, meaning you sometimes have to backtrack. I really didn't see the need to make this so tricky and why it couldn't just be 3 jumps and you're there. And what changed this area from horrible to unbearable is that there are encounters in this area, meaning that alongside this annoying traversal mechanic, there were mini fights that would interrupt you from time to time. So if you want to have a smooth ride when trying to sort out this puzzle, I would suggest maybe turning encounters off. Finally reaching the entrance, you will then enter the Cave of Shadows, an area specifically meant for the Dark Knight job where all the equipment and weapons you can find here are specifically made for this specific job. Additionally, this location is made of hidden paths which you'll need to traverse just to reach the end, where upon reaching it you'll find the final fang that your party has been looking for. When picking it up, you'll break the seal of a monster and we will enter a fight with a Hecatoncheir.
Hecatoncheires.
It will use spells like Quake, which deals earth damage to the entire path. Defeating it, you will obtain the Fang of Earth, and oh, by the way, you will have to travel through that damn puzzle again with the Invincible. So have fun with that. You will also need to return and fetch the Nautilus, because even though we obtain the Invincible, it's ironically unable to handle the strong gales to Doga's mansion. Arriving in the manor, you'll hear Doga's voice tell you that he and Une have been awaiting our arrival. He then instantly teleports us to an underground area that we'll have to fight through to reach them. Upon finding them, they tell us that the Eureka key is almost ready, but we'll need to defeat them in battle. Confused as to why, they explain that extremely powerful weapons were sealed in Eureka as they were too powerful for mankind, but due to the current situation they are now necessary. To complete the key to Eureka, it also needs a massive amount of energy to create the key, and it can only be produced in battle. Refusing to fight, Doga then takes the initiative and forces us to enter battle with him. When entering the fight, Doga takes on a monstrous form which confused me as to why he would take this form or why he would look like this. I would say that maybe he takes on this form to make it easier for the party to fight them, but that falls apart immediately because in the next area, you fight something called Doga's clone, and it takes on the exact same form. Maybe because they didn't want to waste the monster design, the developers decided to use it for Doga's form. Additionally, and this is speculation, in the original script, Doga and Une were going to betray the party and reveal they were servants to Xande, and were monsters the entire time, hence why you can find clones of Doga and Une in the next area, implying that Xande was the one who created them. Because if you look at the monstrous forms of Une and Doga, it looks like they have the ability to transform. After fighting Doga, his body lays on the floor. Une then rushes us, telling us not to worry because even if their bodies may perish, their spirits can't be destroyed. Defeating her, Doga will then tell us the Eureka key is complete and to take it with us. Before passing, he reiterates Une's words about their spirits persisting without their bodies. Une then also gives us a Cypress key, which is needed to enter the door to the tower before passing on. With the Eureka and Cypress key in our possession, we can finally head to the Crystal Tower to end Xande's terror. Going along the path of the statues, they'll each explode as you pass through them. We can then take the Invincible and get over this wall blocking our path to the tower. We then enter the Ancient's Maze, where upon entering the room in front of us, we can find the real Earth Crystal. Entering the room, we will be ambushed by Master Xande's servants and enter a fight with Titan, who looks and works the same as
Hecatoncheires.
we fought earlier, but this time it can use Flare. Defeating it, we can finally interact with the Earth Crystal, which tells us that Xande has been using its power for evil purposes and to drown the world in darkness. It then tells us to use its powers to defeat the Cloud of Darkness, and gives us access to the Magus, Devout, and Summoner jobs. The Magus and Devout jobs are direct upgrades of the Black and White Mage jobs, as they're now able to use level 8 spells for their respective jobs. The Summoner job is also a direct upgrade to the Evoker job, where they are able to use high level summoning magic, where each of the summons become a devastating attack that deals massive damage. It also removes the white and black summoning version of the summons when summoning using the job, as it always guarantees the ultimate attack being used. Sorry, I just chuckled a bit there because I just said summon so much that I started to even take note of it. Before continuing further also, since I have the summoner jobs, I thought this would be the best time to get the optional summons we can find in the game, but I'll explain why it's unnecessary to find them later. In Final Fantasy III, there are a total of 3 optional summons you can fight and obtain the summon magic for. The first is the level 6 summon Odin. You can find him by traveling under the ocean east of Saronia. There you'll enter a dungeon and near the end you'll come face to face with Odin himself. Defeating him adds him to your list of summons, where his white magic version casts Reflect on the party, his black magic version deals physical damage to all enemies, and his high summoning version instantly kills all enemies. On the floating continent, you can use the invincible to jump over a mountain range and reach a hidden lake. By landing on a specific spot and using a canoe to travel across a shadow on the water, you'll then be teleported to this dungeon over here. At the end of it, you'll encounter the level 7 summon Leviathan. Defeating it unlocks a summon that, in its white magic version, casts Demon Eye, which can petrify enemies. The black magic version deals wind damage to all enemies, while the high summoning version unleashes Tidal Wave, a devastating water attack that hits all foes. With the invincible, you can then jump over another mountain range to reach Bahamut's lair. After progressing through a series of dungeons and exiting the final one, Bahamut will then fly in and challenge us. Upon defeating him, he becomes a level 8 summon, where his white magic version casts Aura, increasing the party's attack power. The black magic version uses Ren to instantly KO a single enemy, and the high summoning version casts Mega Flare, blasting all enemies with an insanely powerful energy beam. I also may have forgotten to mention this or didn't add it, but the instant KO abilities as well as the Petrify are all based on chance with varying amounts of success. Returning to the ancient maze, we can then battle through some of the more difficult enemies until we reach the outside and can enter the Crystal Tower. Going into the room straight in front of us, we can find the doorway to Eureka, where upon using the key Doga and Une gave us, we are then teleported there. When entering Eureka, I have to admit I kind of love the design of the place because it feels as if it's a place that is outside of space and time with a grand feel to it. Traveling through this area, we'll come across some powerful enemies, and going further along, we'll have to defeat some powerful bosses to obtain the weapons locked away in here. You can find weapons such as Masamune and Excalibur, but it seems that Excalibur has been replaced as the strongest weapon by the sword called Ragnarok. You can also obtain the final 2 jobs in the game, the Ninja and Sage jobs. The Ninja job is a direct upgrade of the Thief job and has the Throw ability. When using this ability, they can use shuriken that deal an insane amount of damage, but unfortunately the shuriken is consumed upon use. In the 3D remake, instead of just throwing shuriken, you can throw any weapon in your inventory, but it's still recommended to throw the shuriken. Then the Sage job is a direct upgrade of all the magic classes, as it combines the abilities of a Magus, Devout, and Summoner, allowing one party member to be able to use high level summons and high level magic for both types. It's honestly best to swap all of your magic users to this class. However, in the 3D remake, the Sage class was changed as it can still cast all types of magic, but it can no longer use the high level summons, making it much more weaker than its Pixel Remaster counterpart. Once you get everything you need, you can then find these vendors here who will sell some really powerful gears and spells. The one thing that I found unnecessary and a bit of a slap in the face is that you could also buy the summoning magic for Odin, Leviathan, and Bahamut, because it feels as if the whole mission of looking, finding, and defeating the monsters was a waste of time. The main benefit of finding and collecting those summons was because they were legendary and only obtainable through these fights. But by them being buyable just cheapens the experience, because as long as I have the right amount of gil, I can get the same benefit, defeating the points of putting in the effort. It also ruins the foundations they set up earlier in the game, where they have all these bards playing songs as well as evokers speaking about the summons, because with all of that, it kind of made it feel as if the only way you could obtain them was by finding them. Anyway, buying what you need, you can then proceed through the Crystal Tower. Fighting through the Crystal Tower and finally reaching this room, you'll find it filled with 5 worms. Looking at the mirrors, the party then finds themselves paralyzed as a mirror traps anyone that looks into it. Xande laughs as we fall into his trap and brings the worms back to life, ready to eat us. Doga then appears, telling us not to worry, as the only way to break the curse of the 5 worms is the 5 hearts of pure light. He then tells us to persevere until he gets back. But my main question is how I'm exactly supposed to persevere when I am paralyzed, because I exactly don't know what he's expecting from me here. He then teleports to the people that we met on our journey, recruiting Princess Sarah, Sid, Desh, who is somehow alive, King Alice, and the leader of the Fallows, although they had much of a smaller part in the story. However, each join as they wish to repay the party for helping them in significant ways along their journey. They are then teleported in to hold off the rhymes? Sorry, is that a typo or did I misread that? No, it's a typo. Okay, moving on. We then thank them and are teleported to the 9th floor, where we come face to face with Xande. He then tells us that he's impressed we made it this far, but are too late as the darkness has drawn near and can't be stopped, engaging us in a fight. In this fight, Xande will use a range of spells in the party such as Blizzaga and Fyra, and will buff himself during the fight to make himself a much more menacing threat. Defeating him, he'll laugh as his defeat doesn't matter due to the cloud of darkness already being gathered. With that, he passes on, but in his place, the cloud of darkness appears before telling us that it will turn the world to nothing as it will be enveloped in the shadows, starting with us. We then enter a fight with the Cloud of Darkness, where our attacks have no impact on it. And this is a fight you are meant to lose, because regardless of what you would do, it will eventually at one point shoot a little particle beam which does an insane amount of damage to the party. The party, defeated by the Cloud of Darkness, then collapses, where the 5 people brought by Doga then rush in, telling us that we can't give up. Doga and Une's souls then appear, giving us their remaining life force to revive us. Doga then tells us that Xande's actions have led to the illusion of light, leading to the dark to grow and birth the Cloud of Darkness. They then tell us that they can't stay long as their souls are going to ascend, and tell us to enter the world of darkness to stop it. The 5 brought by Doga then wish us luck and pray for our safe return, before we then jump and fall into the world of darkness. By the way, a bit of a warning, the difficulty spike here is insane for the last leg of the journey. A majority of the enemies have massive health pools, and don't be surprised if you have to go back and grind. Even though I had multiplies and was decently leveled, I still struggled as the enemy's health pool was stupidly high and my team nearly got wiped out on multiple occasions. I'm not sure if they increased the difficulty here to make the game feel longer or to make you really earn the win, but if it's the latter, it was a bit of a BS move, because when games try to make you earn that win, they usually set that expectation from the beginning. For example, the Souls games. They are notorious for their difficulty, but winning was gained from preparation and skilled play. The precedence of earning your wins was present throughout the whole series and wasn't a thing of a random difficulty spike out of nowhere. Here, most of the fights were reasonable, and if you fooled around, you were obviously going to lose, but they weren't so difficult that they felt like a slog throughout the game. I hate to imagine how long I would be playing if I didn't have the boost on, because at least in the previous areas, the bosses were not all of a sudden breaking expectations. In this area, you'll also have to go to each of the crystals and save the warriors of the dark that are trapped within them. To free them, you'll have to fight difficult bosses here that I even struggled with, and dear god, these were not easy. The bosses have excessively large health pools and can deal some serious damage. Additionally, throughout this area you can find 4 treasure chests. Each of these contain a fight with a clone of Xande who has been buffed. Defeating him, you'll be rewarded with a ribbon, a really useful defensive item that can protect your party members from status ailments and adds elemental resistances, except for lightning and drain. After freeing the 4 warriors of the dark, we can confront the Cloud of Darkness. It introduces itself again and declares our world will be sacrificed to the void. It then tells us that the powers of light are useless in the world of darkness. But before she can continue, the warriors of the dark we freed earlier appear, stating that our power may not be enough, but their powers of darkness can suppress its evil, sacrificing themselves to defeat the Cloud of Darkness, taking with them the crystals of the dark. The Cloud of Darkness, weakened by this, states that to replace the power it's lost, it will defeat us and absorb the power of light instead, engaging us in a fight. This was a bit of a difficult fight, regardless of which version you play, but for me the Pixel Remastered version was a bit trickier because the Cloud of Darkness would at one point spam the particle beam attack, dealing an ungodly amount of damage to the party, so make sure that someone on the team is constantly healing the party. At one point, I was trying to revive my healer, but by the time they were back up, they were down again because the Cloud of Darkness would use its particle beam attack. And so it became an endless cycle of me bringing them back and them falling down. And at one point, I got fed up and just attacked, not realizing that it was on its last legs, and I was just putting my healer through this hellish cycle of recovering and being defeated. After defeating the Cloud of Darkness, the credits will roll with the following being read. In the beginning, there was the void. Then came the light and darkness. From them, everything was born. The heavens, skies, water, fire, life. Time inexorably brings all back to its beginnings. But from life, something new was born. A shining force that separated the light from the dark and illuminated the world. It was called hope. When the balance between light and dark is broken, and the world again slides towards oblivion, the chosen will appear once more. Do not forget that the source of the warrior's power is the hope that lives inside us all. Dreams, despair, love, time can obscure it all. Do not accept this, do not forget it, and time will never erase what life has to offer. Find your last remaining spark of light, a light that shines brightly when all else is dark, the light of hope. Returning from the world of darkness, we are welcomed by our friends congratulating us. We then go to the home of each of the characters, dropping them off one by one. We first drop off the leader of the fellows, thanking him for his help. Saying goodbye, he tells us to visit them anytime. Next, we drop off Alice at Saronia. He thanks us for helping save the world, saying that he would be happy if he could even lead his kingdom with half of our courage. Then swapping to the Nautilus, we then drop off Serekanan, but Desh asks to also be dropped off there as well, as he wants to return to his girlfriend Selena. Selena and Sid's wife are happy to see them, with Sid offering us to come over for dinner one day. Dish offers to join on any future adventures, but is shut down quickly by Selena. We then offer to drop Sarah off at her castle, but she says she wishes to stay with us a little longer, confessing her feelings to us. To be honest, this romance arc came out of nowhere for me too and feels like it was just pinned out of nowhere, but ignoring that, she then says let's go to Ur. We then arrive and the residents are happy to see us return, congratulating us, with Papa and Nina coming to tell us how proud they are of us. Then everyone turns to look at the crystal of the altar cave as it shines brilliantly as it has regained its former light and brings the dawn of a new age. So I don't really have much thoughts to add here as it's a pretty straightforward ending, thus bringing the end to the Pixel Remastered version of Final Fantasy III. So let's go over the 3D remake. To start off, when starting the 3D remake, before actually entering the game, a short movie plays showing snippets of the party, their journey, and them working together. The characters in the 3D remake also have official names, which are Luneth, Ark, Refia, and Ingus. They also each have unique backgrounds, dialogue, and personalities written for each character, unlike the Pixel Remaster, where they are just given the bare bones of a backstory, and that's about it. Also, when I was playing the Pixel Remaster version, I was actually naming my characters using them because for some reason I stress when making up names. Another difference is the options that are available. As you probably would have guessed, the 3D remake doesn't have the same options offered by the Pixel Remaster. So to make up for the fact that I have a limited time, for the 3D version I had to mod it so that I can have an XP multiplier available throughout, and although it's scummy, I was glad I did, especially when I reached the final area, because dear god, it was much worse in this game. I also didn't enable God mode or one-hit options because I felt it would be a little icky and would have killed the majority of my experience. At times, the random encounters would also become a little heavy-handed where every 2 steps I was engaged in a fight, so to say the frustration, I, at times, turned them off to allow me to re-explore some areas freely. In the Pixel Remastered version, the whole party falls together into the hole at the beginning of the game. But here in the 3D version, it's only Ludith, who is described as adventurous by nature and raised by Nina and Topapa in the village of Ur. Unlike the Pixel Remaster where we already start off with the full party, in the 3D remake, as we go along our journey, we will meet the Warriors of Light. Also, when playing, the environments in the 3D remake were well done, as they were being faithful to the original maps. At least I think so, as I don't know the liberties that Pixel Remastered took. I also did appreciate the design choices that they gave for every character in the game. And I especially love seeing the 3D counterparts of the 2D versions of monsters. Oh, and another big difference is that in the 3D remake, you're kind of locked out of jobs a bit longer because the only time the Wind Crystal will give you its power is when you have found all the other members for the party. So just returning back to the characters, the next one we meet is Ark, who is described as Luneth's best friend and was raised alongside him by Topapa and Nina as he too was an orphan. But unlike Luneth, he prefers reading to exploring the wild. Then next you'll meet Refia, who is also an orphan who was raised in Kazu's village by the mithril smith named Taka, whose rigorous training led to her running away again. Throughout the story also, you'll see that she mainly behaves as the big sister of the group. Then heading to Castle Sasune, if you remember from the Pixel Remaster version, there was a lone soldier that managed to evade the Jin's curse due to being out on a mission at the time. In the 3D remake, this character becomes one of the main protagonists, Ingus, the 4th member. Throughout the story, he is shown to be the cool-headed one and has a strong moral compass. He also has a close relationship to Princess Sarah, making the romantic relationship that appears later in the story make much more sense. The 3D version also adds more depth to some of the scenes as some interactions were added between the characters as they have more dialogue with one another. In the 3D remake, the guest characters can also have different dialogue depending on the area you're in. When I found this out, I immediately went everywhere to see what would be said. Additionally, the personality of the party members are much more emphasized in this version. For example, throughout the interactions with Desh, you can see Refia's disapproval of his treatment to Selena. When speaking about airships, there's a joke of Ark still not being over the airship being destroyed when trying to escape Nile Valley. I also found it funny seeing Refia give the appropriate reaction to watching 4 dudes kamikaze themselves here. So personally, story-wise, I feel this version just has more to offer, and I really appreciated that. In addition to this, the guest characters will also aid the party during battle, where they'll either deal damage to a foe or cast buffs on the party. They also gave the main 4 a background as well, with Sid being directly related to it, stating that the 4 party members were originally from the surface, where many years ago, Sid was transporting passengers on his airship, but then the calamity happened and the only survivors of the incident was him and the 4 main characters, explaining how they ended up on the floating continent. For Alice's storyline as well, he and Ark get close during their adventure and become quick friends. In one of the random cutscenes you can trigger, Luneth will comment on Ark being eager to help Alice, saying that he's probably happy he found someone shorter than him trying to save the world. leading Ingus to scold Luneth and telling him that what Ark is doing is noble. It's these little interactions in between that give the guest characters as well as the main four some more depth and also prevents them from feeling like blank slates. Just like in the Pixel Remaster where they didn't really have much to add to the story. Additionally, they also introduced Mognet, which is a system you can use to receive letters in the game from characters. The letters you can receive or look at changes depending on the leader of the party. At certain points in the game, you'll receive mail from characters that you've met along your journey, where it'll either give you more lore or unlock some side quests, as some can even lead to unlocking the Onion Knight job, which is a secret job in the 3D remake, and getting the Ultima weapons, which were absent in the 2D versions. Also, one last thing, the Crystal Tower, as I mentioned earlier, is way more difficult in this version, as I had to struggle during the final fight, so yeah, have fun with that. Unfortunately, even though the 3D remake does a good job at characterization and connecting some of the plot points in the story, the overall story of 3 was a massive downgrade, especially in the Pixel Remaster. So to begin getting into my final thoughts, the game suffers from disjointed writing, especially in the middle section, where the main quest about the crystals is put on the side and the story suddenly shifts into a mission to defeat Xande. Unlike 2, there's little to no characterization to discuss here, as most of the cast is pretty one-dimensional, and the main villain is pretty bare bones, as it's just a case of he was mad, got corrupted and turned evil, making a lackluster villain. Additionally, I find it funny how nearly all of the events were due to him, but when we meet him, it's extremely short and he doesn't even do much. He just ends up being replaced by the Cloud of Darkness. When writing this part, I just constantly kept thinking of Madara Uchiha from the Naruto series. Throughout the story, Madara is built up as this powerful ninja, and throughout his appearance, he shows why he is a threat. It feels like he always had the upper hand, and throughout the fights you learn about his backstory about loss and seeking revenge, making a compelling story and a really interesting villain. But then all of a sudden, Kaguya, the literal mother of chakra, basically a god, comes out of nowhere and takes over the role as a final villain. It feels like the writer Masashi Kishimoto was trying to up the stakes and the epicness, but by doing so ruined what would have been a great and perfect final villain, and tarnished what would have been a great concluding arc for the series. And no, I'm not going to talk about Boruto, that thing is already doing a good enough job at being a train wreck. But in relation to Final Fantasy III, they tried to up the stakes by making us literally fight the darkness instead of trying to build Xande or do something with it, making it really unsatisfying and kinda killing the momentum the story was already struggling with. So for me, Final Fantasy III's story was a downgrade from 2, especially for the Pixel Remaster version. Because for one, at least the time loop that Garland trapped the world in to obtain immortality was an interesting concept that I loved, and even though the characters are forgettable, I'll always remember it for that. Final Fantasy II also had a really good story and the characters were really well thought out. Even though I had a lot of theories that may or may not be true, it was interesting thinking about all of that. But for Final Fantasy III, besides the job system and side objectives, really had nothing to grab onto. I did appreciate that at least a 3D remake added a lot more depth to the characters as it made the story feel more alive, but unfortunately even that too is dragged down by the overarching story. Also, I just wanted to add that the final words that roll after defeating the Cloud of Darkness were unearned, as it feel like they were just there to tug at your heartstrings, but when thinking again about the story, it just feels disingenuous. So if I were to rank the Final Fantasies, this is how I would do it. First, Final Fantasy II Pixel Remaster. This is at the top of the list because I really enjoyed the story that was told, especially when revisiting it. Additionally, I really enjoyed the leveling system where your characters adapted to your strategy. In second place is Final Fantasy III, the 3D remake. Even though I had gripes about the main story, what really pushes it to number 2 are the character interactions as well as the job system. Because throughout this version, they added cutscenes which explain why you're going to certain locations. Example, after acquiring the water crystal, Une visits us in our sleep to tell us what we need to do next, whereas in the Pixel Remaster version, we just go there because we heard about the mages being there. And as I've mentioned previously, the interactions between the characters really prevent the story from being bland. Then in third place, I put Final Fantasy I, the Pixel Remaster. Although the story is pretty straightforward, I did really enjoy the concept it brought with the time travel loop, as I am a massive sucker for those kind of plot threads. Additionally, while the characters were wordless, the surrounding story was easy to follow, and had a twist villain being Garland. So I merely ranked this in third place, mainly for story reasons. Then in final place is Final Fantasy III, the Pixel Remaster. While the job system does wonders for the game, unfortunately the story was its downfall. The reason I didn't put it below the 3D remake is that one advantage that one had is that the main story was straightforward and there was always a reason why you were going to locations. Whereas in the Pixel Remaster version, it felt like our main quest is the crystals, but we are helping the people, and it just so happens that when we are doing so, we find the exact things we need for the main storyline without a clear connection. And that is the end of the Final Fantasy III review for both the 3D remake and the Pixel Remastered version. Thank you all for watching, especially if you made it this far. I really appreciated it. And keep an eye out for Final Fantasy IV, the 3D remake, and the Pixel Remaster version, as I am currently working on that. Hope you have a good day, and catch you in the next one.